working, maybe. Sorry, give me a second. I'm just trying to get all my screens up and running. Ah, we are live. Excellent. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to get where I can see the comments and not a whole lot of noise. Let's see if I can make that happen. There. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirbaum with Melco's application team, and this is our DesignShop Talk, where we get together on a weekly basis to try to answer any questions you might have. How do you send in your questions? Well, you can email them to applications@melco.com. You can type them in on the stream itself down under the comments, and we'll try to get them answered while we talk. Okay, so is it working? Oh, it's live on YouTube. I'm trying something new, so I'm getting new notifications. That's odd. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in and I'll get them answered. So here's some of the ones we got ahead of time. Can you demonstrate how to do a walk stitch from an end of one thing to the start of another? Okay, so yeah, if you have a question, just type it in, and I'm going to start doing these and I'll jump over to the actual questions. If you see me looking off to the left, it's at my second monitor, so I can actually questions. All right, so the first question here is, how do we do multiple walk stitches without having trims between everything? Good morning. So a lot of that has to do with paying attention to starts and stops. So that's going to be your first thing to pay attention to. So if you've never done a walk stitch, that's just a set of stitches that goes from, it does a needle penetration, moves over, does another. It's how you do like a line of just stitches in a row. It's this element right here. You can do also insert walk. If you're into the keyboard shortcuts right here, Control Shift and the number 2, you would click on that one. All right, so right here we've got our walk. You left click to start. You can right click around curves, whatever you want to draw. When you get done with one element, you would hit enter. What you'll notice on the screen is there's this propeller. That shows you where you last ended the element I just drew. So this squiggle line ended where that propeller is. So if I don't want to have a trim, what I want to do is start near that thing. Okay, so if I start my next element near that, then you can see there's like a little connector stitch there between them. Okay, so by paying attention to your starts and stops, you can help minimize trim, not have a trim here and then it start right back in the same spot. Now, another thing, if you're noticing that you're seeing trims like that, what you'll want to look at are your properties. So if I go into the properties of these traces or of these lines, and I look at my tie in and tie off, these are your lock stitches at the start and end of an element. So style 1 is just an inline type of lock stitch. Right here, this auto trim property is what's deciding whether it's going to trim or whether it's going to continue sewing and just do a connector stitch between them. So what this says is from 1, if it's set to 64 like I have it right now, what does that mean? Well, that means for this element, I ended where that red X is. So from where that element ends to where the next one starts, if it is smaller than 64 points, about 1/4 of an inch, then it's going to just keep sewing, not do a trim. If it's bigger than 1/4 of an inch, it'll do a trim, the machine will move to the next one, it'll do a tie-in and start going. Okay, so that is for that question. All right, so you look at those properties, pay attention to your starts and stops. If for this one, let's say I have that one way over here, notice it's no longer doing a connector stitch. That's because that's longer than 64 points. So if I wanted to make those connect, I would need to bring them closer together, because now, based on the properties, it'd be lower than 64. Okay, so that was that one. That was actually a leftover from last week. Let's see, if you were typed in, I created a design with lettering and I did automatic borders on the letters. However, the Y border is not consistent. How can I fix just that letter? Okay, so you can go in and modify the wireframe of that. I'll show you that in a minute. Let me read the next one. I can never remember how to select a few nodes from a design and move them as a whole. Okay, that one, before I create the lettering, let's quick look at that since I've got some scribbles up here. So if I've got different nodes, all right, so I've got a bunch of different points on here, and I want to select them. I don't want to do one at a time moving. right? I don't want to do that. I want to move them as a group. Well, what I would do is there's multiple ways. You can hold the control key down on your keyboard and left click on these nodes. Notice they're all turning black. So now that they're all black, the 3 I selected will now move as a unit. Okay. Another way you can do that is to select your elements, and right here you've got this custom point selection tool. That allows you to draw circles around what you want. So let's say I want those 3 points. I drew around them. Now I can left click and drag, and there you go. Now we've got, you're getting a lot of live video interrupted messages. I don't know about that one. I am trying something new today, so if it's, I'll revisit that with Nate and the guys at the end to see if there's something else we need to do different on my side over here. All right, so automatic borders. So automatic borders, what they are, first off, is if I have some lettering and I go into the properties and turn on auto borders, that's going to put borders around the text. If there is a particular letter you want to modify, you can of course go into the properties and play with the properties of the actual the auto borders. So you can add caps. A lot of times when you're dealing with those little kind of things that shoot off, by playing with the caps you can correct some of that. Another way is to convert it over into wireframe and go into your wireframe editing, and that'll allow you to again modify the wireframe that you want to change. So from here, now that I'm in wireframe editing, I can see everything to be able to modify it. Okay, so if there's some particular area you want to get rid of a point, add a point, whatever it might be, now that I'm in the wireframe editing, I can do that. Okay, all right, let's see what else. I think that's all that we're typed in so far. Yeah, I like this, I can scroll. All right, so let's see, how do you preview a stitch out? I've seen it done, but I don't know what buttons to push. Okay, so what do you do for that? So what is a preview? A preview is where you get to see how it's going to stitch out ahead of time. So the mess I currently have on my screen, what do I do with that? Well, down here, you'll see this is kind of an info bar. I've got some dimensional locations. Down here, I've got size, count. Here, you'll see there's a play button. That's my redraw. Okay, so that will be a slow redraw where I can actually watch how it's going to sew out. I use it mainly for checking my work when I do digitizing projects, to just get a quick look to make sure I caught everything. Okay, so that's what this play is. Now, if you want to slow it down, that's going too fast for you, that's fine. Lower this number. You can make it go really slow to study how it's going to go. Increase the number, it'll speed it up. You can jump forward or backwards in the design by clicking these little arrows. Okay, so you can kind of watch it redraw. All right, so that is your slow redraw. That's this one. How do you preview a stitch out? That would be your preview. All right, wire settings like 3D view and active hoop we display on the screen, not shown anymore when a design is saved and then reopened. Those features are, well, first, what are they? So if you're not familiar with them, 3D is this guy right here. So it shows stitches in 3D. It simulates what it's going to look like in thread. And then your hoop is this one right here. So if I come and select, right click on it, tell it what hoop I'm going to use. So let's say I'm going to draw this in a hoop. I got it. Anyway, so that is persistent to the software itself. So these settings, if I leave it in 3D, when I open another file, because I had it on the last file I opened it in 3D, it'll show up in 3D. So it's persistent to the software, not to the individual files. That's just how DesignShop is. So I guess we can add that as a feature request to make it persistent to the files rather than to the individual, rather than to the program as a whole. Well, let's see. We do a lot of text name embroidery, and we want to fit the text to an area. So they have a specific example, and I'm just, rather than reading it all to you, let me show you. So their specific question was this. If I have, okay, actually let's leave that. So let's say I have some sort of design and I want to put text next to it. I want this space here to always be the same, and I want the size that this fills to be always the same. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, first you got to decide those parameters. So I did that using a vector. Okay, so I said, all right, I want all the text to be 2 inches wide by 1/2 inch tall. To draw my vector, we came over to the vector fill tool, selected the rectangle, left clicked, and then I selected the object. Down here, I turned that off and said, okay, I want it 2 inches wide by 1/2 inch tall. All right, so now I have a 2.5 or a 2 by 0.5 inch rectangle. What is that? That's just going to be a guideline. I know Scott did a video on Wednesday talking about using vectors to help align. That's all this is. It's creating something for me to reference. Well then, let's say I want it to be a 1/4 inch from my heart in this case. Okay, again, I just drew a vector line that was a 1/4 inch long. Okay, so that's to set where this box goes. That's how far away, just to give me some reference art. Now from there, you would create your text. So I'm going to click on the screen, type my name, and then I'm going to get it relatively close to size since this is way too big. Okay, still too big, but that's all right. All right, this is what we're trying to avoid having to do every time, is rescale this. Okay, so if I want it to fit in there, what I'm going to do is we're going to go into the properties and use the envelope feature. Okay, so if I double click on it, I go to line type right here and change that to envelope. Hit apply. What you'll notice, 2 lines appear at the top and bottom of this with triangles on the end. So I can now take that and move it to my rectangle. So I'm going to move those to these points. And to keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a rectangle like this. I'll show you in a minute. So I can come along, fill in the area I want the text to be, and I'll turn off my vectors, and what you'll see now is I've got text jammed into that box. Well, now if I change it, go into the properties, type another name, notice it fills the same box. Okay, so we don't have to keep modifying that to scale and stretch. Now, to fill the entire space. So in this case, if I wanted to do like something really short, notice it's going to stretch the text out, kind of strange, and that may not be the look you're going for. So, but when all your things are relatively close and you just want to squish and stretch it to fit within the same region, you can use your envelope to do that. Now, another way you can always do it is, let's say you take your name. Down here, I can turn off that lock aspect ratio, and I can come over and say, okay, make that 2 inches wide and 1/2 inch tall. I can just type in the dimensions I want it to be. All right, so that's another. Now, the downside to that is you have to keep on moving it around to position it where you want. Whereas if you use your envelope tool, you don't have to worry about that. It'll just fill in the space. So again, that's another one. I did the exact same thing. I took a design, I drew a vector here of where I wanted to fill in, created my text, and set it up as an envelope. Now, what I meant before is it doesn't have to be this shape. Is, let's say I want that to arch down to fill up more of the region below it. Well, now I can do that. So when I double click on it, change the name, notice it'll fill. All right, my pole compensation is way too large for this size text at the moment, so that's why you see it kind of looking too bold. But how did I add that point? Well, I just click on the that line above it. Left clicks give you straight points. Right clicks give you curves. Okay, so you can change that so that your text stretches out to fill whatever shape you want. Oh, let's see. More questions. Oh, that's a bummer. OBS says, well, I'm going to keep going and hopefully this will start working. Oh, internet speed is slow today. Okay. Well, we'll get the video uploaded afterwards, so hopefully that fixes it for you. And we'll see what's going on with the internet speed. I'll test it again afterwards. All right. I'm going to keep going just in case it's working. All right, so that's this one. How do we make it stretch within an area? Another question we had is, why do we select, why is a hoop selected in DesignShop, not transferred over to OS? It's really a safety thing, and it's just how it was designed. When you're over in OS, you know, your digitizer may not be the same person running the equipment. So it's always safer for the operator to make sure that they're selecting the actual hoop that they're putting on the machine,